Excellencies and Chiefs of Navy from across the globe, heads of delegations, flag officers, commanding officers, distinguished delegates, ILOs and Foreign Service attaches, officers, distinguished guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, namaskar, and a very good morning to you all. On behalf of Admiral R. Hari Kumar, the Chief of Naval Staff, it is indeed my honor and privilege to extend a very warm welcome to you all who have joined us today from across the world to participate in the International Maritime Seminar as part of Milan 22. As you are aware, the Indian Navy has been hosting the biennial event of Milan with the aim of enhancing professional interaction between friendly foreign navies and also share valuable experience in multilateral large-scale operations at sea. The seminar, with its theme of harnessing collective maritime competence through collaboration, would focus on the challenges posed at sea by emerging non-traditional threats and developing the collective ability to address these challenges. The seminar is spread over 4 sessions. In the first 2 sessions that will be held today, the discussions will be on the themes changing character of competition and conflicts at sea and enhancing capabilities towards shared maritime security. The speakers for the seminar represent the array of nations that are participating in Milan 22. And for the benefit of those who could not be present in person, the seminar is also being streamed on YouTube. With that now, may I now request to commence the proceedings, the Chief of Naval Staff, Admiral R. Hari Kumar, to please come on stage and deliver the keynote address.
Heads of navies, heads of maritime security agencies, ambassadors, high commissioners, senior delegates from friendly foreign countries, CNC East, National Maritime Security Coordinator, distinguished dignitaries, flag officers, veteran officers, commanding officers, delegates, fellow seafarers, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning to all of you. And at the outset, I would like to express my gratitude to all of you for participating in the International Maritime Seminar of Milan 22 and for sharing your time, insights, and ideas. Maritime outreach and cooperation are key enablers for like-minded nations to work together with common purpose towards collective growth and prosperity. The presence of so many friends and partners here today is indicative of our united recognition of the importance of maritime relationships, and these in turn are enabled and driven by constructive conversations and engagements. Conversations such as these are critical to solving the challenges that we collectively face in the region. And I feel there is no better place at this moment than Visakhapatnam to do this. Visakhapatnam is a fascinating confluence of culture, cuisine, and coastline, and we are adding conversation to this mix. Being able to get together to exchange ideas and thoughts despite the constraints imposed by COVID-19 is also a reaffirmation of the resilience of the human race to tackle any challenges, whether medical or maritime. Aptly, therefore, the theme of the seminar, Harnessing Collective Maritime Competence through Collaboration, derives from the overall theme of Milan 2022, camaraderie, cohesion, and collaboration. It is said that while land borders may divide, the seas unite. Being the global commons, there is a natural tendency in the maritime domain for nations to engage and collaborate. With the seas being the lifelines of global trade and prosperity, most nations have a core interest in keeping these commons free for commerce. This is one of the primary reasons that concepts such as like-minded partners, free, open, and inclusive oceans have all gained greater currency in the recent past, concurrent with the growing realization of the relevance and potential of the oceans. As oceans go, the Indian Ocean has for millennia served as an invaluable conduit for trade, supported livelihoods, enabled cultural and social exchanges and interaction, and as a result, evolved its own unique identity. The overall ethos of the Indian Ocean has been one of coexistence and adjustment, where respect for diversity is intrinsic to maritime relationships between the states and the peoples. The broader Indo-Pacific too is distinctive by its predominantly maritime character. The trade highways and energy umbilicals of the world crisscross these waters, directly supporting and influencing growth and prosperity for all the nations and the people of the Indo-Pacific. Also, all of us share extensive maritime trade and exchanges. We are all moving in the same direction, enabled by a common factor, which is the maritime domain. Yet, matters maritime do not necessarily assure global consensus. The vastness and open nature of the oceans also present a host of challenges, along with a multitude of opportunities. While opportunities straddle multiple sectors like trade, energy, fisheries, and so on, the challenges are also spread across an equally extensive spectrum. Many of these manifest as threats which are transnational and thus simultaneously affect all of us. However, at the same time, given that resources will never be adequate, it is virtually impossible for any one single nation to counter these challenges and ensure maritime security and stability by itself. The solutions thus lie in working through a cooperative or collaborative system alongside like-minded maritime nations with a commonality and convergence of purpose. Hence, the idea of collective maritime competence has great relevance for all of us, where each one of us brings our respective capabilities to bear with an equal seat at the table. When it comes to finding collaborative solutions for challenges in the maritime domain, I firmly believe that like-minded navies can show the way. Given the deep connect each of us as mariners have with the oceans, we also realize our unambiguous responsibilities in this regard. In recent years, there is increasing convergence on views regarding the fact that these responsibilities cannot be restricted to protecting our respective trade alone, but it needs to expand to all of us, becoming the collective fulcrum of a shared approach to tackle common challenges. In fulfilling these responsibilities, there are no better custodians than the navies to act as collective sentinels of a shared common heritage, as India's Honorable Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi ji, calls the oceans. Navies are trained to operate in well-coordinated formations, follow accepted international rules, and share large, similar vocabulary, ethos, and traditions. Maintaining good order at sea, therefore, is a responsibility that the navies discharge on almost a daily basis. So, if you are to assure security and safety in the global commons, like-minded navies such as all of ours would need to pool expertise, experience, and resources, and then work together to maintain and manage the global commons which underwrite global prosperity. This, to my mind, is no longer merely desirable, but essential. As far as the Indian Navy is concerned, we have prioritized certain elements in our effort to play a more constructive role in building collective maritime competence. Let me outline 3 such elements. The first is to support harnessing of the multitude of competencies that are resident among each of our navies. To this end, we have prioritized the creation of a participative and inclusive ecosystem for everyone to participate as an equal partner while tackling common maritime challenges. The second aspect is engaging partner nations to develop interoperability and trust. Trust cannot be built in a day, in a week, or even a month. We understand that building trust requires sustained and continuous engagement between friends. Initiatives such as Milan are aimed at fostering such trust. When we work and operate together, we not only learn from each other, but also develop trust while imbibing best practices. The final element is focusing on the persistent problems faced by regional nations on a day-to-day basis. Addressing these problems together makes the multilateral constructs more output-oriented and useful. So we want to make a real contribution to a freer, more open, and increasingly inclusive global commons by cooperating with like-minded nations. So today, we are traversing through a contested present into an uncertain future. Volatility and complexities have become characteristic of the world that we operate in, and many of these manifest in the maritime domain as well. The future of the global commons hinges on cooperative effort of all our nations. We can accomplish prosperity, security, and growth for all only if we collaborate in the maritime domain as well. This collaboration must be evolved through mutual understanding and respect. And I firmly believe that maritime nations are necessarily a maritime community, and oceans are our common heritage as well as destiny. In this endeavor, our navies and maritime security forces have a key role to play, being the primary manifestation of our respective nations' maritime power, and therefore it's a mandate to ensure safety, security, and stability at sea. I would like to conclude by quoting from a book authored by India's Honorable External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, titled The India Way, where he says, and I quote, "Navies working together in pursuit of shared goals have a stabilizing impact," unquote. This also aptly summarizes the spirit of Milan 2022 as well as this seminar. The Honorable External Affairs Minister, Sri Dr. S. Jaishankar, has conveyed his deep regrets at not being able to participate in the seminar due to urgent, unavoidable commitments. He conveys his best wishes to each and every one of you present here today. I'm sure that this seminar will be of immense value to all participants and the audience alike, and will provide avenues for furthering maritime cooperation. I'm indeed looking forward to hearing your views and ideas during the seminar. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir. With that, ladies and gentlemen, the stage is now set for the commencement of today's deliberations. The first session will discuss changing character of competition and conflicts at sea. May I request the session chair, Vice Admiral G. Ashok Kumar retired, the National Maritime Security Coordinator of India, and the speakers for this session, Admiral Samuel Papro, Vice Admiral Mike Noonan, Commodore Shaheen Rahman, and Admiral Yamamura Hiroshi to please come on the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, the session chair, Admiral Ashok Kumar, has held various challenging staff and command assignments in his distinguished career of nearly 40 years before he retired in July last year whilst serving as the Vice Chief of Naval Staff. His contributions to the Indian Navy have indeed been immense and include an array of operational and administrative initiatives such as the concept of mission-based deployments, implementing the transition cycle, launch of the IFC-IOR, inauguration of Naval Innovation and Indigenization Organization, introduction of the Bachelor of Technology program at the National Defense Academy. The Admiral has recently been appointed as India's first National Maritime Security Coordinator. With that, I now request you, sir, to please take over and conduct the proceedings for the first session.
Chief of Naval Staff, can you hear me? Okay. Chief of Naval Staff, Admiral Hari Kumar, visiting chiefs, excellencies, naval officers from 40 different countries. It's a highly impressive number. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure for me to be chairing the first session, which is changing character of competition and conflict at sea. If you actually look at this topic, it's a very interesting one because these two words, competition and conflict, actually end up covering a wide array of activities that we routinely do, both during peace and in war. And it actually includes all our deployments, all our bilateral and multilateral interactions, the diplomacy or the maritime diplomacy that we carry out, and the operations that we undertake. It's a very well thought out topic indeed. If you actually look at peacetime today, on a daily basis, we are into some kind of a competitive peace. Because you find there are nations around us who deal with what we call the lawfare or exploiting the maritime law to gain advantage or even to get things which are essentially, wartime objectives. That may be because of geostrategic or geo-economic compulsions. We also see strategic communications to kind of influence the other nations. You see use of non-military assets for military purposes. This again is actually exploiting maritime law or the loopholes in the maritime law. You find there are, influences which are gained out of creating economic dependencies, and that's a reality too. So there are many things that happen in the peacetime that each one of us need to be aware of, need to take stock, and actually plan and execute our own programs accordingly, including these kinds of events, collaboration between the navies to make sure we are head on with all these peacetime requirements. When you come to conflict, you find that change is one definite constant. Because wars have obviously evolved with time, mainly, but not all by itself, technological advancements. And that's something that affects us, all of us today. Whether it is just long range, more accurate, more lethal missiles which have made the green zone in which we can operate ever so small, whether it is advancements in niche areas of space, cyber, artificial intelligence, or quantum communications, and the likes. I'm sure you all as naval officers are fully aware of all this. So this again, is it the old concept of warfare that we must continue with? Or isn't there a requirement for us to constantly be relooking every aspect of warfare? Whether it is force creation, whether it is our own operational plans, deployments, tactics, because this actually impacts every aspect of our future operations, indeed the current operations too. So to talk about all this, I couldn't have asked for a more heavier weight panel than the one which is sitting with me. So to my right, I have got the PAC fleet and the Chief of Australian Navy, and to the left, I've got Commodore Rahman from the Bangladesh Navy and the Chief of Japanese Navy. So I don't think you could have got a better set of panelists to tell you all about these issues of competition and conflict that the navies face on a day-to-day basis. Thank you very much. Now, may I invite the PAC fleet to open the innings. And just a small brief about him. I'm sure you would have been through the booklet in which all the biodatas are given. But Admiral Sam Paparo is the US Naval Aviator and has flown over 6,000 hours in F-14s, 15s, and the FNA-18s. Believe it or not, he has got 1,100 carrier landings. He landed on an aircraft carrier. In his illustrious career, the Admiral has held various operational commands at sea, including air commands, joint service appointments, shore assignments, and the executive staff appointments. His most recent assignment was commander of the US Naval Forces CENTCOM, or the 5th Fleet Commander and the boss of CMF, as you all are aware, before he shifted east and went across to Hawaii to take over as the PAC fleet. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Admiral. Thank you very much. Thank you to all delegates, all of the people of the sea that are here assembled in Mellon 22, a meeting of the minds and a meeting of great minds. And I also want to pay my great respects and great compliments to the Indian Navy for putting on such an absolutely magnificent convocation of great minds. Every element of it has been executed with grace, elegance, and style, and every element of it has, in fact, increased the camaraderie, the cohesion, and the collaboration of all of the solidarity of navies that are here assembled during this great conference that I think is going to confer great benefit in terms of the security and the well-being of all of our nations. I'll begin with an expression that was greatly featured in yesterday's discussion, which is the international rules-based order. It's such an important concept that has underpinned lifting 60% of the world's population out of poverty since the Second World War, and has in fact been a great miracle to so many of the citizens whom we are all sworn to defend. This begins with the concept of sovereignty, and that is the inviolability of borders and the fact that anathema to the order itself is the notion of changing one's borders by force. It is also underpinned by freedom of navigation, freedom of the seas, and the United Nations Conventions on the Law of the Sea. And this is a great irony of the system, that while recognizing the sovereignty of land borders, we recognize the freedom of the seas. And it's that combination of sovereignty of land borders and openness of trade, the free exchange of goods, services, and ideas across the global commons that has underpinned this magnificent growth that has lifted 60% of the world out of poverty, and lift 160,000 human beings out of poverty every single day. And in fact, these are the principles that we're all sworn to uphold. This is why the solidarity of all of the nations who are included in this conference today are assembled, understanding these basic but essential truths on which each of us has sworn our lives. I think that I want to compliment also the Indian Navy on the underlying themes of camaraderie, cohesion, and collaboration. Camaraderie is the start of it, and it recognizes that each of us is human. And in fact, I've read studies that every single one of us can trace our DNA to a single woman in East Africa. We are, in fact, a great human family. And a look across the crowd here would demonstrate that as naval officers, as people of the sea, we're all wearing the same uniform, we operate on the same customs, and we are greatly agreed on all of the values of the international rules-based order. To uphold the international rules-based order really requires our own cohesion, and that for those that would upend the order, they abhor nothing so much as they abhor the solidarity of nations that are determined to uphold it. And then in order to uphold it, again, underscoring the wisdom of the Indian Navy in laying out the themes of this conference this year, is our ability to collaborate. And to collaborate begins with people that agree on a basic set of concepts. It then people build relationships among each other. We do this via exercises and all of the things that we're doing as set by the magnificent example of Millen 22, and then the systems that enable the interoperability in order to do this. And then just a few thoughts on the changing character of competition and conflict at sea. And that is operating under the internal cognitive dissonance of the concepts of sovereignty and freedom of the sea. We find that freedom of the sea is increasingly threatened by the ability across all domains, air, land, sea, space, cyber, and information, to threaten those essential freedoms that are underpinned within the United Nations conventions on the law of the sea. And this ability to affect events at sea is due to the increasing commoditization of space and cyber systems and the increasing reach of precision-targeted weapons to affect events at the sea. And that, when combined with gray zone operations, that temptation on the part of an actor to execute operations that, with the threat or the use of force, but without incurring the risk of armed, declared uniform force, would potentially enable a malign actor to upend this international rules-based order that is so essential to the security, to the freedom, and to the well-being of all of the citizens whom we all represent while wearing these common uniforms. So in final closing, in these introductory remarks, I'd like to pay my very high compliments to the Indian Navy for driving these two twin themes of the changing character of competition and conflict at sea, and the way that we solve these problems, which is with our camaraderie, our cohesion, and our collaboration, so that we might ever continue to improve the human condition among all of the citizens we represent, and to continue to uphold the international rules-based order. Thank you, my dear friends.
Thank you, Admiral. Next, we have Vice Admiral Michael Noonan. Vice Admiral Noonan assumed command of the Royal Australian Navy on the 7th of July, 2018. The officer was commissioning commanding officer of the Anzac class frigate, HMAS Parramatta. For his distinguished and exceptional service in the Navy, Admiral Noonan was appointed as a member of the Order of Australia in June 2012 and later elevated to an officer of the Order of Australia. Vice Admiral Noonan.
Thanks very much, Admiral Kumar. To my dear friend, Admiral Hari Kumar, ambassadors, high commissioners, distinguished guests and fellow mariners, thank you very much for the opportunity to not just be here at Exercise Milan 2022, which we have all eagerly awaited for a number of years now, but to be part of this seminar this morning. It's indeed humbling that against the backdrop of what has been a tremendously challenging period over the last 2 years, that under Admiral Kumar's leadership and the facilitation of the tremendous women of the Indian Navy, that you've been able to bring ships and people and mariners from 40 countries together this week. It's a tremendous achievement, and I congratulate you most sincerely. I'd like to share some thoughts this morning along the theme of changing character of competition and conflict at sea from an Australian perspective, and particularly from an Australian naval perspective. A century ago, Alfred Teo Mahan wrote, "Men who deliberately postpone the formation of opinion until the day of action, who expect from the moment of inspiration the results commonly obtained only from study and reflection, who hope for victory, are guilty of yet a greater folly, for they disregard all the past experiences of our race." For almost 50 years after World War II, competition and conflict at sea were framed by the dynamics and the characteristics of the Cold War. By competition between two major world powers and their allies, with the fundamental tension of the knowledge that any mishap or miscalculation may trigger mutually assured global destruction. Since the 1990s, however, that dynamic has changed. The breakup of the former Soviet Union and the loss of many of its allies saw the United States emerge as the one global superpower with an unrivaled economic and military superiority across the world's oceans, and the ability to pursue its national interests largely unimpeded. More recently, that paradigm too has begun to change. The emergence of China as a global economic and military power, keen to exercise its influence across the world and to take its position as a, if not the leading world power, has created an increasingly complex global security environment. An environment that ever more frequently is characterised by the overt challenges to the free and open international order, and by strategic competition between nations. This has brought with it a change in the dynamics of competition, if not yet conflict at sea. The way this competition is prosecuted has also brought with it a change in the nature of the threats we face, a change that requires a fundamental rethink of the character of warfare and warfare at sea. China, of course, is not the only nation which has changed this dynamic. A number of countries seek to pursue their strategic interests through a combination of cohesive activities, including the use of espionage, political or operational interference, and the application of economic levers. Tensions over territorial claims and the establishment of new military facilities are rising and increasingly involve the use of military or paramilitary forces, including notably coercive paramilitary activities in the South China Sea. Grey zone activities are being adopted more frequently, integrated into statecraft, and applied in ways that challenge both national sovereignty and international habits of cooperation. State-sponsored, ambiguous or proxy operations offering a level of official denial, featuring aggressive or measured short-term armed conflict are being used in pursuit of national agendas. China's use of a maritime militia is an often cited example of grey zone operations. In March 2009, hydrographic survey operations being undertaken by USNS Implicable in the South China Sea were interrupted and significantly disrupted when the vessel was, in the words of the Australian maritime strategist Professor Rory Metcalfe, mobbed by a motley flotilla, all under the Chinese flag. More recently, in March 2021, and arguably more dramatically, the highly regimented mooring of around 220 blue-hulled Chinese fishing vessels at Whitsun Reef, a disputed territory in the South China Sea, claimed by the Philippines and Vietnam, demonstrated another form of grey zone operations. Dealing effectively with these challenges is a key facet of the strategic competition that exercises our minds as naval leaders in the modern era. As naval officers, we understand and accept there will always be challenges in our maritime domain. It is the nature of the sea to be ever-changing, dynamic, and never still. The same can be said of conflict at sea. Our effectiveness requires us to adapt, to anticipate, and to be prepared. While conflict follows a natural cycle of adaptation and response, it is not necessarily linear or constant, nor is it necessarily predictable. And for this reason, we cannot allow ourselves to remain in a phase of lag or stagnation. Our adversaries will not discard opportunities, nor will they be hesitant in exploiting our weaknesses. If they perceive that we are not prepared for a different mindset using high-end or low-end asymmetric conflict techniques, then we should not be surprised if they continue to exploit such approaches. However, while some facets of conflict are changing, others remain constant. The ability to cooperate is a feature of the most successful naval forces. So while we evolve to meet new challenges, we must do so together. Institutional agility in the face of this changing character of competition and conflict at sea is paramount in order to regain and maintain the initiative. We can and should anticipate combinations of grey zone, multi-domain campaigns over extended periods. Our adversaries will not engage us on our terms and will not fight against our strengths. They will seek to weaken or sow distrust and to gain asymmetric advantage. Given this complexity and the implications of unconventional threats, it is imperative that we embrace this newly identified reality. This essentially means that our new approach must consider managing warning, capability, preparedness, and detailed planning for rapid expansion. Defence planning must now consider that conventional warning time assumptions supporting force expansion and base concept must now be obsolete. At least we have known that until now. The ability of a nation to develop substantial conventional military capabilities is no longer a sufficient metric to assess capability or intent. While this can look like an insurmountable challenge, I am confident that it is not. Navies have adapted to changes before, and we will continue to do so in the future. Technology, tactics, and the ambitions of adversaries are always evolving. The advent of submarines did not remove the need for surface ships, but it did change the way that they operated. Unrestricted submarine warfare drove evolutions in tactics and posed a new set of technology and training challenges to solve. The advent of aircraft, guided weapons, space, cyber, and grey zone will all generate similar evolutions in the way that we think and operate in our maritime domain. And ladies and gentlemen, I look forward to facing these challenges together. Thank you.
Thank you, Admiral. Next in the line, we've got Commodore Shaheen Rahman. He's from the Bangladesh Navy. He's a gunnery specialist, having done his long G from INS Dronacharya. So he shares that with our chief. He's also commanded various ships ranging from small patrol crafts to large frigates. He's also served as a UN staff officer at United Nations mission in Haiti and as the member of operations in Chittagong port. The Commodore is presently appointed as the Commander Flotilla West. Shaheen, all yours. And in case you want, you can go across there.
Thank you very much. Respected Chief of Naval Staff, Indian Navy, other Chief of Naval Staffs across the globe, ambassadors, high commissioners, head of delegations, flag officers, defense attaches, advisors, commanding officers, officers, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and very good morning. It is indeed a great honor and privilege for me to be here and join such an enlightened forum on behalf of Bangladesh Navy. At the very outset, I would like to express my heartfelt thanks and sincere gratitude to Organizing Committee of Indian Navy for hosting Milan 2022. I do sincerely acknowledge the warm hospitality extended to us and momentous endeavor undertaken by Indian Navy for this grand event. I shall start my presentation with the saying where Prime Minister India, Narendra Modi, mentioned at Shangri-La Dialogue in 2018, and I quote, "Our common prosperity and security requires us to evolve through dialogue and a common rules-based order for the region. It must equally apply to all individually, as well as the global commons," I unquote. From the very beginning of the recorded history, peoples have sought to be powerful at sea. They could recognize that there was something uniquely cost-effective in the deep and the vast blue seas. Some tens to thousands of years ago, mankind began gathering food from the sea. Then the trading system started some 2,000 to 8,000 years ago in the Euphrates and the Nile areas. Gradually, it turned into a complex web of inter-regional, regional, and sub-regional system. For centuries, the vast sea was generally regarded as empty and open to all for trade and travel. Gradually, the idea to use the sea as a dominant evolved. As you all know, that through the Treaty of Tordesillas of 1494, the ocean of the world were divided into two, one half to Portugal and the other half to Spain. Through time, the history evolved, creating opportunities and conflicts, diverse facet and dimension. Hugo Grotius, a Dutch jurist and philosopher, expressed in his book, The Freedom of Seas, in 1609, that the seas were held to be essentially free, and they could neither be exhausted by promiscuous use, nor could they be enclosed, occupied, or appropriated. Thus, most states are benefiting from the free movement of commerce allowed by the freedom of the sea. However, after the Second World War, the trend of coastal state expansion began. The chief underlying cause has been the demand of maritime resources like fisheries, offshore petroleum, natural gas, and later the mineral deposit on the deep seabed. Dominant naval powers took big steps in claiming mineral resources beyond their territorial seas. Other states also moved in the same direction, claiming ever wider zones. In course of time, it was well understood that the seas may indeed be exhausted by promiscuous use due to too much of fishing, too much pollution, and too much of traffic, and so on. As a reply, the international community set a classical example of customary law by convening UNCLOS, which came into force in 1994. One can easily predict that in the decades to come, the sea could become the sole bone of contention. The prospect of conflict and or cooperation among the littoral states are affected by multi-directional factors. A variety of transnational threats like border dispute, illegal exploitation of mineral resources, trafficking of drugs, arms and people refugee, flows, insurgencies, and so on, disrupt regional peace and stability. Since the beginning of 21st century, human interactions with the ocean space are becoming more intense and complex. As an endeavor to gain more resources, coastal states are increasing their footprint beyond their territorial sea, or is it giving rise to complicated maritime disputes? For decades, disputes over maritime boundaries and interpretation of treaties have been left unresolved among many neighboring states. These are now becoming contentious issues, even escalating to direct clashes at times. Nothing in the international law formally bans foreign naval maneuvers outside the territorial sea of any coastal state, and warship of all nations enjoy the right to transit passes in the international states. This allows the large naval powers to position their ships as per their geopolitical goals and strategic needs. In several instances, such military activities are creating tensions and giving rise to instability, even up to conflict in that particular region. In the 21st century, mankind has observed shift from regular organized warfare to irregular, unconventional, non-linear, non-standard methods of waging war by non-state actors. This new dimension has been commonly described as low-intensity maritime operations, which covers a whole range of activities against terrorism and ranging up to insurgency at sea. Irregular warfare is becoming more regular than classical regular war between the organized military forces. In this evolving environment, navies are often tasked to perform non-traditional constabulary functions frequently to ensure coastal or offshore security. Coastal states enjoy exclusive rights on the resources within their EEZ and continental shelf. However, overharvesting and illegal fishing activities raise concern in several areas. An inventory by Professor Boriswam on December 2020 showed that 29% of fish and seafood species have collapsed or are projected to collapse before 2048 unless immediate action is taken. The health of the world's ocean and marine life is degrading rapidly as a result of excess human activities. It threatens water quality, marine ecosystem, resulting in negative impact on fishing and tourism. Overfishing, land-based discharge of sewage and industrial waste, hydrocarbon spillage, and finally the global warming are the main cause of marine environmental degradation. Today's maritime industry and commerce are intertwined more closely than ever as a result of globalization and growing global interdependence. This growing density has also encouraged the growth of diverse maritime activities. As a result, maritime nations need to cooperate with each other to enhance global and regional capabilities. It has been observed that the political cooperations and economic integration could become more dynamic and efficient between the neighbors of the same geographical area. Neighbors can face together common problems by building larger-scale regionalism. Under this large umbrella, different sub-regional systems can create well-affirmed economic integration and political cooperation to construct geopolitical equilibrium. Another maritime complex security issue is the race to exploit minerals. This complicates combined efforts for better maritime environment. Adherence to UNCLOS principles and respect to the neighboring countries can surely minimize unwanted conflicts and arrive to amicable settlement. It is the best interest of humanity to exploit the sea in a manner that is protective and sustainable. If the degradation pressures are allowed through climate change and overexploitation, then the marine ecosystem might become fragmented and unstable to adapt. The future challenges for protecting marine environment will hinge on addressing collective understanding and cumulative efforts of all. Seas and ocean are the drivers for the economy and has great potential for innovation and growth. A robust strategy is must to support sustainable growth in the marine and maritime sector as a whole. It is none but us, the mariners and professionals, to think and act rationally and promptly. A timely collective endeavor will certainly ensure peace and stability with no misinterpretation or conflicts in future. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
We come to the final speaker in the panel, and I dare say the best speaker in the panel. Admiral Hiroshi Yamamura, in his 35 years of service, has commanded the destroyer JS Mineyuki, the Fleet Escort Force, and the Escort Flotilla 4. His staff appointments include Deputy Chief of Staff for Defense Plans and Policy, Joint Staff and Chief of Defense Section, Defense Division, and the Maritime Staff Division. In March 2019, the Admiral took over as the 34th Chief of the Japanese Navy, or the JMSDF. Sir, all yours.
Thank you for your introduction, Admiral. And it's a pleasure to meet you all. I'm Admiral Yamamura, Chief of Staff of the Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force. First of all, I would like to express my congratulations on the success of the Milan 22, despite the difficulty due to the COVID-19. I would also like to express my deep gratitude to Admiral Kumar, Chief of the Indian Navy Staff, for giving me the opportunity to give a speech at this seminar. Now, I would like to talk about why cooperation is necessary, referring to recent changing character of competition and conflict at sea. At the sea, there are threats such as illegal fishing, piracy, and smuggling. In addition, in recent years, actors have emerged who attempt to unilaterally change the status quo by force based on their own assertions incompatible with the existing international order. Also, there have been some dangerous acts that may lead to unexpected situations. The characteristics of competition at sea are changing in this way. But in order to respond to these challenges, it is necessary to harness collective maritime competence through collaboration. In fact, I have a deep attachment to the word collaboration. Since assuming the Chief of Staff of the JMSDF in 2019, I set up 4 lines of effort. One of them is collaboration. I have worked with not only our ally, the US Navy, but also other partner navies to deepen defense cooperation and multilateral cooperation based on the relationship of trust. At present, the JMSDF operations not only in the Pacific region around our country, but also in a wide range of areas. This includes the Atlantic Ocean by the JMSDF training squadron, the Indian Ocean and Oceania region by Indo-Pacific deployment units, as well as the Middle East region and the western part of the Indian Ocean by anti-piracy units and information gathering units. Specifically, in the past year, The number of JMSDF vessels, aircraft, and personnel engaged in the activities overseas amount to the 114 ships, 59 aircrafts, and more than 10,000 sailors, respectively. In addition, joint exercises were conducted by a total of 22 countries, 183 naval vessels, and 35 aircrafts. In addition, from this year, we began the Indo-Pacific Middle East deployment we call IMED. This is a new initiative that illustrates our intention to focus on the Indo-Pacific region, but also on the Middle East. There are major sea lines are located. IMED units have conducted bilateral exercise with the navies such as Brunei, Bangladesh, India, and Sri Lanka before visiting Bahrain to participate in the International Maritime Training, IMX 22. Going forward, we are planning to call at Cambodia and Malaysia after visiting Sri Lanka again. In this way, the JMSDF is implementing various measures to ensure that everyone can freely use and benefit from the ocean, which is an international public good. In order to continue these efforts and carry them out more effectively, we believe cooperation on a strong trust with partner navies, including you all, is essential. This is because the issue in this vast ocean cannot be addressed by one country alone. We need to work with our allies and partners to protect the rule-based maritime order and maintain regional peace and security. For that purpose, it is effective to plan and participate in naval exercise to build trust through mutual understanding and to enhance interoperability. Fortunately, navies have the advantage of being able to operate without personnel body contact at sea. As I mentioned earlier, the JMSDF intends to deploy units in as many areas as possible, even under the COVID-19, and to actively participate in bilateral training and multilateral training, such as Milan 22 this time, in cooperation with partner navies. The JMSDF will continue to work together with an ally and the partner navies toward a free, open Indo-Pacific, toward a free and open Indo-Pacific, where everyone can freely enjoy the benefits of the sea. Thank you for listening. Namaste.
Ladies and gentlemen, so that we come to the end of the remarks by all the panelists. So I noticed that insofar as time is concerned, we are actually well ahead of DR. Now the house is open for any remarks, stroke questions that you want to ask, so that more people can ask. Please keep your questions to just one sentence. I'm sure the admirals understand what the intent of the question is, and I'm sure they will take it on accordingly. Okay? The house is open. And please introduce yourself. Just your name, rank, and the country will do. And in case you are addressing the question to any particular panelist, you can mention that. Otherwise, they will take it on, I'm sure.
Morning, sir. I'm Captain Nitin Saxena, Postal Headquarters, Eastern Naval Command, the Indian Navy. Sir, I see the esteemed panel. It triggered me to connect to the Quad, established on the shared vision of free and open Indo-Pacific. As IOR sees great power rivalry, a short mention of which was made by Admiral Noonan, may I request views of panel how they foresee Quad partnership changing character of competition and conflict at sea. Thank you, sir.
Thanks very much. I'll speak first, and I'm sure that our other members would like to add. The Quad is a very important diplomatic construct, and we have seen significant interaction between the governments of India, the United States, Japan and Australia, and most recently the 4 foreign ministers and defence ministers met only 2 weeks ago in Melbourne in Australia. And amongst their many discussions, there was extensive commentary and agreement around maritime cooperation, information sharing, and doing more together at sea. So I look at it through the lens of the things that we're talking about in this seminar. Our navies and our militaries are well experienced in working together, particularly with the 4 countries that we've mentioned. And I think that in terms of delivering on those political expectations and those requirements, our navies, particularly of these 4 countries, are well able and well ready to do so. And so when it comes to that question of more, that is our domain to determine what more looks like. And obviously that comes down to our capacity to generate more activities at sea, but look for those opportunities in which we can share our experience and our individual skills to bring us together to be stronger than the sum of the 4 parts.
If I may, I'll just offer a few comments that I hope will complement my dear friend Mike's comments too. First, underscoring the fact that the Quad is a diplomatic arrangement. Strategy always follows policy, and as a matter of prudent planning, I think all 4 navies have embarked upon an effort to increase the total sum of our collaboration at sea, with a particular emphasis on information sharing, on maritime patrol, on undersea domain awareness, and all of the elements of naval power that can be brought to bear. This is to a very great extent because navies are more oriented to cooperate among each other just because of the nature of our operations and the nature of the domain in which we operate. And it also is born of a necessity of the common values that the 4 Quad nations hold as maritime democracies and as the growing threats to the free and open Indo-Pacific. And as you can see from the Quad, from the east, from the north, from the south, and from the west, within the Quad, you can see the geography of the interests, and you can see how the strategy will follow the policy. And so increasing numbers of exercises, increasing information sharing, the greater combining of our networks to enable those. All of this is a path that we're on from a prudent planning standpoint so that the strategy meets the policy of our nations. And we have realized that our fates and our interests are intertwined. And we see in this a growing collaboration and a convocation of our futures. Thank you for that superb question.
Thank you. I think very well answered. You want to add something? Or? Oh, sure.
Thank you very much. My personal image is a Quad, naval Quad is, I think, should be act as a hub of to make a cooperation with all partners navies and all aspects of the naval activities. So we are trying to make a trust and confidence to make many plan of the exercise all around in the Pacific Ocean. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Next.
Good morning, sirs. I'm Captain Uday from the Indian Navy. My question is to all the panelists. How and where do we draw the line between collaboration and protecting own national interests? particularly in the backdrop of a rapidly changing geopolitical canvas? Thank you.
I'll begin to say the place where we draw the line between our collaboration on our national interests are drawn at the political level. And one of the great traditions of all of the nations represented here is the great tradition of civilian control of the military. And so I think the way that we understand a free and open Indo-Pacific and the way that we understand our alliances and our deep partnerships is that every member comes as they are. Every member offers what they can to the extent that their political leadership agrees. And you know, the principles of understanding that looking after our own national interests always comes first to each one of us who wears the uniform. But in most cases, with the growing threats and the changing character of competition and conflict at sea, we find more and more that our interests and our collaboration, in fact, converge to the point where we're seeing less and less that this is an issue. On the occasions when there is a difference, inherent in our alliances and our partnerships is our fundamental respect for each other's interests. Otherwise, it's not a real alliance. You know, every alliance and every partnership begins with the expression that each member is equal. Each sovereign nation expresses its will in the activities. And at the political level and our own level, we find those elements where our interests converge, where our activities can contribute, and we find ways to synchronize those operations, activities, and investments that enable each of us to serve the nations for whose uniform we all wear. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'd like to expand on a couple of those points that Admiral Paparo has most eloquently made. I think the notion of national interests is absolutely born out of sovereignty, and that will always be the absolute determinant that governments use as the decision point for the national good, whether it be for changing the dynamic of national policy, whether it will be based on capabilities of a military. The national interest will always be that first determinant around political decision making. But I think then, as Admiral Paparo very clearly articulated, the line of where a country's national interest becomes a shared interest in our region or in fact our globe is absolutely driven by the fact that all of us here are members of the global community, and we're absolutely committed to the international rules-based order. If we weren't, we wouldn't be in this room right now. And certainly as we seek to protect our own sovereignties, we also seek to protect and ensure the prosperity of the international global economy and the international security domain, of which we all have enjoyed the ability to move around. And so ultimately, you know, our ability to support others, particularly those who are less able than we are, be that economically, be that in a security domain, or in their protection of their own national interests and national assets. As Admiral Paparo said, you know, we are all have an equal right to prosperity. We all have an equal right to security. And when those rights are challenged by others, it's up to us to lend a hand. And certainly the area that we are all very familiar with in terms of humanitarian aid and disaster relief. It's without question that our governments will seek to help those in need in times of disaster, and we've seen that most recently play out in Tonga, a small country ravaged by a typhoon, and within days there were ships from the Japan Maritime Self-Defence Force, there was ships from the United States Navy, there were ships from the New Zealand Navy, ships from the Australian Navy, there to lend the hand to a partner in need. And so there are things that we can control, things that we can predict, things that we can't predict, and certainly those issues around disaster, climate change, for which we all have a shared responsibility to plan for, but more importantly react with. I think that extension of national interest very quickly becomes regional and international. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good question and nicely answered, but I want to cite an example. As you know, that Bangladesh economy has performed quite well for the last 10 years, and we have been doing really good. The first one is the backbone of the economy is the agriculture, remittance, and the ready-made garments. And we have started looking towards the blue economy, which is really needed for next 40 years or so. What happened is that, the issue has started. Basically, I want to cite that example of the Rohingya issue. And one fine morning, 1.3 million people started coming in, and that creates the really problem. And our development is getting halted. And the humanitarian assistance has been taken over by geopolitical issue that you have pointed out very rightly. So, as our Chief of Naval Staff also said, partnership is very important, trust is very important, building trust, never with the neighboring countries, sub-regional countries, and the regional countries, that is much more important. So anything happened in the land, it always has got some effect in the sea also. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. To make a cooperation with countries, each country has some political background issues, also the geographic issues. So to make the plans of the exercise or dialogues, we have to respect the situation of the countries. The important thing is that don't send a wrong message to other countries.
In short, I think all of them have brought it out well, that navies collaborate pretty naturally, and it comes very easily to navies because each one of us operates in international waters. And yet, collaboration is not some blanket sanction. It'll definitely be kind of issue-based. I mean, you might not want to collaborate in a certain field with the best of your friend. You might want to collaborate with probably one whom you don't talk to in certain areas. So that's the, I think, par for the course, and we'll just take it as it is. The next.
Good morning, sirs. Perhaps Perks, Royal Australian Navy. How concerning is the threat of cyber in a free and open Indo-Pacific, given its predominance of use in grey zone warfare?
Grey zone warfare?
I'll start, seeing it's an Australian question, but it actually has universal application. So thanks for the question. Look, I think that all of us here 10 years ago wouldn't have thought to ask a question about cyber warfare and how it might affect our navies. Here we are in 2022, and cyber effects are something that immediately spring to mind in terms of the things that we have to prepare for and, in fact, counter. And certainly they are not just used in the space of military to military, and this is the point of the question. Grey zone operations are, by their very nature, targeted against all elements of national power. And certainly what we see in Australia is a strengthening of our military understanding and application of cyber, both in an offensive and offensive posture. But more and more every day we are seeing cyber attacks against our government, we are seeing it against industry, and we're seeing it against smaller elements of Australian society more generally. And by nature of the asymmetric nature of that threat, it does in fact have a disproportionate effect on your military capabilities. For example, we've seen a number of instances where we've seen cyber attacks against Australian defence companies who individually may not be seen to be delivering a complete capability, but collectively, if their cyber defences are weak and their technologies are exploited, ultimately the strength of the capability that they're building on behalf of the Defence Force is compromised. And so we have a national responsibility, an international responsibility to ensure that we're not just cyber safe and cyber worthy as navies, but we are also assisting the industries that support us and those other mechanisms of the inputs to our capability that we rely upon. The whole system needs to be cyber safe. The supply chain needs to be cyber safe. And that in itself is a huge, huge challenge because it is all pervasive. It's a specialised skill set, and I certainly know that I need a lot more of it.
I'll address the question first by just for the basis of common understanding, to give a layman's definition of gray zone operations and gray zone warfare itself. And it is the state-sponsored activities that would present as below the level of armed conflict, sometimes lethal, sometimes violent, and sometimes not, that is malign behavior on the part of an actor that seeks to gain concessions or gain resources at a lower risk of declared uniformed armed conflict. And nations have two choices with gray zone. They can take it, or they can defend and counter it. In fact, gray zone operations are a means by which actors hope to exploit asymmetries, that is, having an overmatch in one domain or another: air, space, cyber, land, information. And in order to counter it, you deal with asymmetry with symmetry itself as an expression of national will. If the nation deems it within their national interest to expend the resources to counter gray zone warfare, they can and they should. So in addition to cyber attacks, we see this in maritime militia that would hope to gain sea space in order to illegally exploit its resources at the detriment of another, maybe militarily weaker actor. And this is an area where it really requires, again, our collaboration, because here within this room, among the 30+ partners that are here, we have the ability to meet asymmetry with symmetry as all of us join together to uphold the international rules-based order. So for gray zone operations is that, and we're wearing uniforms and we generally think and deal in black and white, nations have this choice to make about whether they intend to counter these. And so that's my very simple answer to your very astute question, which is the way to deal with gray zone operations are to defend and to counter it, and to fill areas where there are asymmetries with symmetries themselves. And collaborating and coalitions, alliances, partnerships offer us unique capabilities to all collectively meet those asymmetries with the collected symmetry of our partnerships. Thank you.
Next question. Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir. I'm Commodore Didik Kurniawan from Indonesia. My question is, historical backgrounds on maritime domains also to make sure the sovereignty of the country also admitted by the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea. But the reality, in fact, historical backgrounds also emerging frictions among the countries, particularly right now is in South China Sea countries. So what is your view, sir? Thank you.
No, so what is the question? I didn't understand. What is the last line?
What is your view, sir?
Huh?
What is your opinion regarding historical background?
Okay. Okay. Anybody wants to take it?
Look, I'll start an answer because it's clearly a very important one, and one that we're all familiar with in the context of the South China Sea. What we're here about and what we're talking about today is collaboration in order to ensure peace and prosperity in accordance with the international rules-based order. And the rules-based order is absolutely steeped in international law and international conventions. And certainly in the domain that we all operate in and have operated in, that is the UN Convention for the Sea. And it is very clear within UNCLOS, and most of us here are signatories to the UNCLOS in terms of what maritime boundaries mean, what they look like, and where the limits of sovereignty begin and end. And certainly in the South China Sea, while we understand that it is contested, some of those maritime boundaries are contested. The behaviour that we have seen by China in terms of creating artificial structures and expanding its maritime claims and maritime boundaries in the South China Sea are simply not in accordance with maritime law. That was challenged by the Philippines in 2016 in the International Court of Justice, and the ruling was in favour of the Philippines. So I think the answer is pretty simple. What we've seen and what we continue to see in terms of behaviour that sits outside of the international rules-based order is not only illegal, but it is a threatening expansion that is not in accordance with the international commons and the ability for all countries to operate freely on the high seas.
I'll just offer in addition that it is a convention, and the enforcement of that convention relies on the solidarity of nations to uphold it. As with any international body, there being no great federal governing body over the affairs of nations, it relies on the will and on the solidarity of nations that recognize that if the Philippines can be exploited, if their seas can be exploited, if a nation can unimpededly take what they want as a function of their power, everyone is at risk. And our habits of mind, our habits of action every single day are those things that uphold the order itself. And this just recognizes a basic element of the society of nations that date back to the 17th century and before, and the principles of sovereignty and the control is the common interests of the society of nations, and the solidarity, the will, and the resolve to uphold the order.
Okay, next. Should we go ahead, Dasu, should we kind of go ahead till the time which is mentioned here, or should we stop at some point in time? Yeah, sure. Okay.
Morning, sir. My name is Captain Saurabh Thakur from the Indian Navy. My question is to the panel on trade warfare. How do the panelists see trade warfare in future conflicts, and what would be its viability?
With respect to trade warfare, do you mean economic sanctions, or how do you define that?
The conflict at sea, sir, the trade warfare in the World War II, there was a fair amount of merchant vessels which were targeted.
I see, yeah.
So-
I'm with you now. Thank you. Look, and I think the previous question leads into that somewhat. And certainly, in that absolute commitment that we all have to unimpeded and fair trade between countries, we all absolutely accept that the maritime commons are essential to that. In the Australian context, 95% of the goods that come to Australia come by sea. And certainly, it is, as an island nation, as an island continent, the sea lines of communication are absolutely vital to our security and our prosperity. And I know that, I talk on behalf of all here. We rely on the sea lines of communication for trade. It's vital. It's vital to our countries, it's vital to our regional interests, it's vital to our international interests. And so I think that, that as you draw that out in terms of future economic reliability, it's vital that we have a very clear understanding of the role of navies in protecting trade. We've seen it throughout history, and we've seen it in recent history. So I have no doubt that it will continue to be a feature around government decision making and force structure determinants as we think about how we organise our navies. And certainly that is an area of great opportunity for collaboration, and throughout history we have collaborated as navies to protect our merchant fleets. Not only our own merchant fleets, but those of our friends, allies and partners. So I see it as a vital function if we were to be called upon to ensure that our trade routes are opened and maintained for all.
I'll offer that there's a great deal more complexity in maritime commerce than there was 100 years ago. 100 years ago, it might be that most trade that came to a country was on ships owned by companies within that country, crewed by citizens of that country, and flagged as sovereign vessels of that country. And yet today, a ship may be owned by one nation, it may be crewed by officers and sailors of other nations, it may be flagged in a flag of convenience from a third nation, and it might hold cargo that is destined for multiple nations and cargo that is owned by multinational conglomerates itself. The days of, say, executing convoys of merchant traffic with stores and materials that directly support civilian populations, that notion of trade warfare is probably a 20th century phenomenon. I can imagine denying sea space to commerce in order to starve nations from receiving commerce from the sea as a potential expression of trade warfare. But there's so much more complexity that the idea of unrestricted submarine warfare against economic products that are supporting a single population that is transported by that sovereign nation's merchant fleet flagged within that nation. I don't see that as a future expression of trade warfare. In the 21st century, warfare has become so much more discerning against capability and against command and control. And there was a time when warfare sought to influence events on land by punishing civilian populations. but the commoditization of sensors, the commoditization of precision strike technology has enabled military forces to become much more discerning about the application of force from a targeting standpoint in order to invoke political behavior. I still think that there is a place for ensuring open sea lines of communication that provides the sustainment of civilian populations. But I think the complexity and the targeting has become much more complex as the enterprise of maritime trade itself has become more complex, and in the ways that technology has better enabled precision targeting with fires and effects against key capabilities that ensure political outcomes.
Is there any more question? Yeah, sure. Just a minute.
Lieutenant Rain Stubbard, Australian Navy. Sir, gents, thank you for your time this morning. Are you seeing enough investment from your young people to continue this effort beyond the next 5 to 10 years? And how are you inspiring the next generation to take ownership?
Take ownership of Milan, is it?
Regional efforts.
Yeah.
Can I take a first hack at that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, to the casual reader of a cell phone, somebody might have some pessimism of the future based on young people. And exasperation with young generations has been a universal feature in humankind through time immemorial. But more critically thinking about this, I'll say this, is that what I'm seeing in my country is many, many more people seek to join the United States military than we have seats for. And the quality, the intellect, the energy, the inspiration, the fidelity, and the zeal of the young people who I see every single day tells me that the future of our navies and our nations has never, ever been brighter. And I'm inspired by your question. I can't see you right now, but I think there you are too. But next time we'll recruit a taller person. I'm inspired by your question. I'm inspired by your service as a young person that has decided to wear the cloth of your nation. And speaking as somebody that sees sailors every single day, including 320 brave sailors on the mighty Fighting Fitz participating in Milan 22, I don't think the future's ever been brighter in our ability to attract high-quality young people and in what I am seeing from those high-quality young people in their service. And I see some Fitz sailors right here, and my eyes are locked directly on yours.
Look, I'll carry on with that theme. There's not even daylight between Admiral Paparo and myself on this question. And while I can't boast over 300 fighting sailors on board HMAS Aranda, I'm extremely proud of every one of the 191 of you. And the opportunity that I had yesterday to spend some time on board reinforced exactly that. As after I left the ship yesterday, my Chief of Staff, a young Navy captain, commented to me how surprised he was and how old he felt amongst the officers and sailors on board Arunta. And I thought, yep, it feels like only yesterday that I was in command of a sister ship, but in reality it was nearly 20 years ago. And so I look at our future very, very fondly and very, very optimistically because I know that the challenges that we face today are certainly more demanding than the challenges that I've grown up with, but I also look at the technologies and the way that we apply them, and what that must force the more senior of us in this room is to think in a different way around command and control. Hierarchical control is something that we've all grown up around, but embracing and empowering our young people both our sailors and our officers to be able to think dynamically, to be agile, and to make decisions is something that not all navies are empowered to do. And so as I look at the way that we will face some of these challenges that I spoke about in my presentation, sure, hardware will play a part, but ultimately it will be the domain of the people in terms of how they operate, how they think critically, how they think inside the OODA loop of the adversary, how they do things differently to the way that we've done them before. And I am very confident and very proud of the young men and women that serve in our navies. The future is very bright.
You want to ask? Go ahead. Yep.
Good morning, sirs. I'm Captain Vishal Raval from the Indian Navy. And my question is a rejoinder to the previous question on trade warfare, and it is posed to Admiral Paparo. So while I also agree that trade warfare is not a viable alternative for conventional navies in the future, but how do you see navies and nations dealing with non-attributable trade warfare due to cyber attacks, disrupting trade and merchant vessels? Your views on this?
I think tight partnerships with like for instance, in the United States, there's the Maritime Administration that recognize that a close connection with the maritime trade enterprises in terms of the ability to see and understand the sea space that they're operating with. And we have a number of partnerships throughout the world, sometimes called Naval Coordination and Guidance at Sea. NCAGS is an example of this, and maintaining our partnerships that understand that there are threats to its sea, and offering the kind of advisories that bring military systems to bear to understand the sea space, to inform those civilian enterprises that move through the space itself so that they can see and avoid. At times when there is sensitive cargo in key pieces of geography, the employment of maritime security teams that can counter some of these gray zone activities. And we've even been in a place at times where we have executed escort of merchant vessels with uniformed naval vessels under reflagging operations. And so I was not so much eschewing the coordination of national maritime fleets as I was really just underscoring the increasing complexity of it, and that it will no longer be a single vector strategic vulnerability that a nation can exploit like it has before. That the nature of competition and conflict at sea, which has become so much more complex, that's become so much more wide-ranging, as Vice Admiral Kumar mentioned in his preamble, is to recognize that is all of a piece. And I speak to you as a former multinational commander of Operation Sentinel in the Arabian Gulf, and I speak to you as the former commander of the Combined Maritime Forces, and the close coordination that we do have with shipping companies, with multinational companies, and at times in contested space with just individual ship with broadcast messages. And that idea of securing sea space instead of individual sovereign vessels, recognizing that because shipping itself is a multinational activity and that there are multinational interests in maintaining the free and open waterways is an important element of it. But that the days of parking a submarine and hitting every American flagged tanker those days are over. There's much more complexity, and it's much more related to choke points and sea space and maintaining the overall trade itself, rather than the individual discerned flag operations of each individual nation itself. Thank you for the opportunity to clarify those points.
One last question in case there's anybody. Okay, thank you all. Is there one up there? Yeah. Keep it short.
Yes, sir. So good morning to the esteemed panelists. I am Lieutenant Commander Niranja, Indian Navy. So for Admiral, my question is for Admiral Papero. So the term you used, cognitive dissonance, is a perfect term which I can think of to express the relation between conflict, competition, collectivism and individualism, a human, a citizen, and the state. So my question goes, how can we as naval forces empower each other and our governments to overcome this cognitive dissonance?
Can you help me with that question a little bit? I was having a
To
difficult time.
overcome what?
Dissonance.
Cognitive dissonance.
Yes, sir. That is.
Oh, the cognitive dissonance. Yes, cognitive dissonance is the fact that land powers themselves are sovereign and their borders are inviolable, but there is freedom of the seas themselves. And that the international rules-based order relies both on the inviolability of land borders as it does on the freedom of the seas itself. And that's where navies come in, and our unique ability to collaborate at sea in the global maritime commons, and yet at the same time be able to bring to bear joint capabilities inside that maritime domain in order to be successful there. But this idea of free and open maritime commons and sovereign nations themselves, it's just a very important distinction. And that the fact that a nation can have an exclusive economic zone that is an area of the sea that they themselves can exploit for the sustenance and for the well-being of their nation, and yet at the same time, the ability to hold open for open movement through those spaces themselves. This is where this cognitive dissonance comes into mind, which defined means that ability to hold two presumably conflicting ideas in your head because that's the way it is. And I think that they're very important concepts. It can be very difficult for people to understand. And if you're wearing a white uniform in here, you are unique in your nation in your ability to understand that. So that may not be a satisfying answer, but that's how I define that. Maybe overly academic.
Thank you. That is beautifully answered. Okay, now I'll just sum up whatever has happened till now in this session. We all are aware as to how for every government, for every nation, the well-being of its citizen is priority one. And with the economic prosperity of any nation being so dependent upon maritime trade, maritime security actually becomes priority one again. Now, in the domain of maritime security, you find that the threats are constantly evolving. That is the topic of this session. And there is also a competitive peace which is in existence. There are many who tend to exploit maritime law to their advantage in case there are loopholes, which we call it as lawfare. There are also some which exploit the subconvention or the non-traditional threats which exist, whether it is just for deployment for out of area or even in ways to gain military objectives through exploiting the non-traditional threats. We've seen that happen too. So there is a constant change during peace. And one of the words I think which was most spoken by each of the panelists and even the questioners was collaboration. I really think with maritime domain, the nature of the maritime domain being what it is, and with every threat being transnational in nature, multinational approach is the way ahead. Like somebody asked about collaboration, of course we'll collaborate where we want, and we need not where we don't want. That's perfectly fine. But collaboration is certainly the way ahead, and the Milan actually sets an example for that. Harnessing collective maritime competence is something that the Japanese chief mentioned as well. And I think that's what it all is about. Whether we are fighting the pirates, whether we are handling IUU fishing, whether we are handling illegal claims in the maritime domain. I really think collaboration is the way ahead. Finally, all that is left for me to say is that I think the audience and we all have been extremely fortunate to have such an array of high-ranking officers, whether it is the PAC fleet, or the Australian chief, the Japanese chief, as well as our neighbor from Bangladesh. It's been a very thought-provoking session, and I must compliment those who asked questions as well, especially the lady officer who asked, and you got the answer. The future is bright, and the future will be bright if we continue to collaborate this way. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, sirs, for the insights and ensuing discussions. May I request Admiral R. Hari Kumar, the Chief of Naval Staff, to please come on stage and felicitate the esteemed panelists of this session. Thank you, sirs. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the first session of the seminar. I'm sure all of us have noted key suggestions and inputs from the discussions. I now invite all of you to join us in the lawns outside for tea. I request the media personnel seated in the front rows to please exit from the nearest door to your left for interaction with CNS. The guests seated in the rows behind and away from the stage are requested to use the central exit, and other guests are requested to use the exit to your left. May I also remind you that the next session will start at 11:25 hours. Thank you. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second session of the day, where we will now discuss about enhancing capabilities towards shared maritime security. The session will be chaired by Rear Admiral K.G. Vishwanathan, retired. May I request the session chair and the speakers, Rear Admiral Jacques Fayard, Commodore Tim Neild, Captain Harisundar Raju, and Captain Junji Tabuada to please come on the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, Rear Admiral Vishwanathan was commissioned into the Indian Navy in 1986, and he is a distinguished postgraduate from King's College London, where he received his master's degree in international security and strategy, winning the Richard Edis Award for Excellence. A graduate of the Defence Services Staff College, Wellington, the Naval War College, and the Royal College of Defence Studies, United Kingdom, the Admiral has, over the last 3.5 decades, served in several appointments spanning operational and administrative disciplines of the Indian Navy. After having served as the Flag Officer Doctrines and Concepts for over 3 years, the Admiral retired from service in 2020. He is currently assisting the Weapons Electronic and Systems Engineering Establishment of the Indian Navy in further refining the functional effectiveness of the combat management systems. May I request you, sir, to please take over and conduct the proceedings.
Thank you. Good morning once again, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. I think we've just come out of a very stimulating session one, and I must compliment the moderator and the speakers. Some very powerful thoughts and creative ideas that were thrown up in that session, and I'm quite certain that the array of speakers that we have with us for session two will make it equally stimulating. The theme for this particular session, enhancing capabilities for shared maritime security. I don't need to educate this audience on the importance of maritime security. In fact, we all know that maritime security has, by and large, emerged as a core concern for the international community, and that is more by virtue of the fact that we see new threats, resurgent threats emerging very frequently, disorders at sea emerging quite frequently, and so that is a cause for concern. The Indo-Pacific actually is quite emblematic of the challenges that confront us in the maritime domain. I'm sure these speakers will be able to touch upon that. And the Indo-Pacific has also largely become a kind of a laboratory, a workshop for the implementation of ideas and, of course, response strategies to be able to cope with these different maritime challenges. And so whether it is capacity building or capability enhancement, you find a whole range of initiatives that have been taken by different countries in the region. Now, intuitively, it might seem that capacity building and capability enhancement are two different buckets with different initiatives falling into each of them. But I think contemporary discourse kind of dispels that truth and says that you can largely look at initiatives cumulatively. And so if it's enhancing material capability, or if it's standing up new forces, or sharpening the ones that you have, or strengthening the rule of the law, institutional frameworks, building domain awareness at sea, all of that contributes immensely towards enhancing maritime capability for shared maritime security. So it's a difficult domain. The problems that confront us are transnational, cross-cutting, they're cross-jurisdictional, and therefore they demand the coming together of the nations in order to be able to cope with them. So I'm sure we will hear more about all of that from this great array of speakers that we have. We will kick off with the first speaker, the Joint Commander of the French forces deployed in the Indian Ocean and the French forces stationed in the United Arab Emirates, Rear Admiral Jacques Fayard, is a very distinguished naval officer, appointed as commanding officer of 3 nuclear submarines, the Casablanca, Triumphant, and Vigilant. And of course, if you take a look at the booklet, the kind of awards that he's won are quite the envy of most of us here. So may I now request the Admiral to deliver his talk.
Thanks a lot, Admiral. Thanks for the warm welcome of the Indian Navy and of its chief, Admiral Hari Kumar. Thanks for the perfect organization of the Eastern Naval Command. And thanks for this opportunity given to exchange on maritime security issues from the French point of view in front of such a distinguished multinational audience in the framework of the Milan International Maritime Seminar. Since September 2020, I have been appointed as Joint Commander of the French forces deployed in the Indian Ocean, and in this position, as Flag Officer Allendien, I have maritime, joint, and cross-governmental responsibilities. I am carrying out operational control of all French air and naval assets deployed from Suez Canal to Malacca Strait. I am the Joint Commander of the French forces stationed in the UAE in the framework of a bilateral defense agreement. I am the commander of the European Agenor operation in the framework of the European-led Maritime Awareness in the Strait of Hormuz initiative, EMASO. I am the national contingent commander of the French contribution to the coalition operation Inherent Resolve in Syria and Iraq in order to defeat Daesh. And last but not least, I am the representative of the French Prime Minister for law enforcement at sea in the Indian Ocean maritime area. I am here because France is a sovereign nation of the Indo-Pacific area. It is a coastal nation and a maritime power in the Indo-Pacific. 7 of the 13 French overseas territories are in the Indo-Pacific. 1.7 million of French citizens are living in this part of the world. Thus, France is a permanent neighbor and not an intermittent visitor within this region. These territories in the Indo-Pacific represent 9 million square kilometers of the total 11 square kilometers of France's exclusive economic zone, which make it the second largest EEZ in the world. And furthermore, more than 200,000 French citizens live in the littoral countries of the Indian Ocean, in Asia, and in Oceania. The French military forces are permanently deployed throughout the Indo-Pacific region. They are based in 2 host countries, that is to say, the UAE and Djibouti, and in 3 French territories, La Réunion, New Caledonia, and French Polynesia. The Indo-Pacific has become the world's demographic and economic center of gravity, with 60% of the world population, 17 of the world's 20th largest harbors, and 75% of the world's maritime trade. Globalization of economy has induced a shrinking of the geopolitical space. The security of the maritime commons and of the sea line of communication has become an issue, and monitoring and securing them is a challenge that goes beyond notions such as borders or geographic delimitations. France and the Indo-Pacific countries are clearly connected and economically interdependent. More than 1/3 of French export to non-EU countries goes to this region, while it represents more than 40% of French imports from non-EU countries. Accordingly, France, as a coastal state, intends to fully assume its role as a regional maritime power. In accordance with the principles and values underpinning its international engagement, France intends to carry out an autonomous and sovereign action from its overseas territories, while actively contributing to multilateral efforts in the global commons. France has 4 strategic ambitions in the Indo-Pacific: defend and ensure the integrity of its sovereignty, the protection of its nationals, territories, and EEZ, contribute to the security of regional environments through military and security cooperation, maintain a free and open access to the global commons in cooperation with its partners in a context of global strategic competition and challenging military environments, assist in maintaining strategic stability and balances through a comprehensive and multilateral action. First of all, France's operational involvement for maritime security relies on its participation in multilateral operations. From Djibouti, France deploys joint capabilities designed to secure the sea line of communication of the Bab el-Mandeb Strait and to fight against piracy. Within the framework of the EU Operation Atalanta, multilateral efforts supported by the joint action of diplomacy and international aid actors allowed a significant diminution of this phenomenon. EU NAVFOR Atalanta has not only curbed piracy, securing 25% of the world's maritime traffic, it has also established the European Union as a regional player in maritime security. France also autonomously contributes to maritime security with a permanent deployment of naval assets in the northwest of the Indian Ocean, either under national tasking or within the multilateral framework of the combined maritime forces. And last year, the French Navy ships under my operational command, in direct support of CTF 150, seized and destroyed 33 tons of narcotics in 25 operations. In the Strait of Hormuz, strategic choke point under a great level of tensions in 2019, France, with 8 other European nations, decided to establish the European-led maritime awareness in the Strait of Hormuz initiative, whose military pillar is the Agenor operation. EMASO is all about de-escalation and inclusive approach for maritime security issues in the Gulf region. We have celebrated 2 days ago, on the 25th of February, the second anniversary of this quiet European success. The 9 European nations involved in EMASO, namely Belgium, Denmark, France, Germany, Greece, Italy, the Netherlands, Norway, and Portugal, represent 30% of the maritime shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. They act in accordance with the international law of the sea, they offer an autonomous maritime situation awareness, and they contribute directly to reassuring maritime shipping in a period of tensions. Our action is framed by our commitment to safeguard a rules-based order. France will continue to uphold the respect of international law, which is the condition for maintaining freedom of navigation and overflight in all international straits and global common spaces. As such, France rejects any interpretation of the law that would not be compliant with the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS. 40 years after the signature of the UNCLOS Convention, France will continue to exercise its freedom of movement wherever law allows it, in particular in the Strait of Hormuz and in the South China Sea. As a leading maritime power, France's maritime security priorities in the Indo-Pacific are to counter piracy, EU fishing, maritime terrorism, and any kind of trafficking. France also intends to protect its maritime-related economic and environmental interests in the area. To this end, France implements a consistent and coordinated Indo-Pacific maritime cooperation policy. Maritime cooperation is a major feature of bilateral and regional engagements. End of March, in the framework of the Indian Ocean Naval Symposium, French and Indian navies will co-organize a multinational HRDR exercise called IMEX 22 off the coast of Goa, with participation of other regional navies like Iran, Bangladesh, or Sri Lanka. France also aims to develop, as a complement to its national engagements, bilateral and multilateral partnerships in the field of maritime domain awareness. That means deepening the existing bilateral maritime dialogues with its partners, That means facilitating maritime information sharing and fusion with its partners. France contributes to the strengthening of the existing information fusion centers in Madagascar, Singapore, and of course, India. France has appointed, since the beginning, a dedicated liaison officer in each of these centers. Our Maritime Information Cooperation and Awareness Center, MICA Center, based in Brest, is a key player in this global network. And since March 2019, France hosts also the EUNAVFOR Atalanta Maritime Security Center, MSC HOA, in Brest. Maritime safety and security as for autonomy of Indo-Pacific countries. On one hand, France promotes its high-performance model of state action at sea, partners. On the other hand, France supports Europe's growing commitment in many areas of maritime safety and security, capacity building, training, funding for maritime information structure, and operational intervention in the Indo-Pacific. These EU projects are complementary to France's national effort. In order to preserve the achievement of the European project MAS, Maritime Security, and CRIMARIO 2, Critical Maritime Routes, Indian Oceans, France promotes with the EU the sustainability of the regional maritime security architecture within the Indian Ocean Commission, IOC, framework. France also advocates a global Indo-Pacific approach for the European project that will succeed to MAS and CRIMARIO. The EU delivered its Indo-Pacific strategy in September 2021. This is a concrete sign of an awareness of the need for our European nations to have a global vision of maritime security. In this respect, France is particularly proactive. It gives the European Union a global legitimacy and presence through its territories and maritime spaces on all oceans. But to meet the challenges of the Indo-Pacific, the EU needs to have a greater presence in the area and to ensure better coordination of its naval deployments. Last week, the EU decided to extend the mechanism of coordinated maritime presence, CMP, to the northwest of the Indian Ocean, as it was already the case in the Gulf of Guinea. Facilitated by upstream coordination between European maritime powers, CMP will provide a flexible framework for maximizing the effects of naval deployments through the regular presence of our units, their knowledge of this area, and the constant sharing of information. It will reinforce our interoperability. In this way, we will be able to collectively better protect the freedom of navigation of maritime shipping in this region. To conclude, France is involved in the whole spectrum of military and security actions in the Indo-Pacific, from maritime interdiction operation to law enforcement at sea, through different levels of cooperation with regional partners. It is not only as a maritime power, but also as a coastal state interested in maritime security in its approaches that France is interested in the Indo-Pacific. I am convinced that efficient information sharing networks, enduring cooperation framework, and improved technical and legal interoperability based on shared values and common interests are key capabilities to the future of shared maritime security in the Indo-Pacific. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Admiral. Well spoken. Our next speaker is Commodore Tim Neal. He's the head of the Surface Warfare Fighting Arm and commands the Royal Navy's surface flotilla across the Portsmouth, Devonport, and Faslane naval bases. He has commanded 5 warships: the HMS Express, the Pursuer, Quorn, Telic, and he's also been on NATO operations. Tim has also been the commander of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire by Her Majesty the Queen in 2020. May I now request you to tell over your talk.
Admiral Kumar, sirs, ma'ams, ladies and gentlemen, a hearty good morning. I'm Tim Neild. I'm the commander of the Royal Navy's Surface Flotilla, and I'd like to thank you for such a warm welcome to India. It's great to be back amongst friends at Exercise Milan 22, and thank you for affording me this opportunity to take part in today's maritime seminar, where we're really privileged to have such a great opportunity to engage in a free and open discussion around some of the most significant challenges and opportunities that face us as maritime nations. Working together, forming partnerships, agreements and alliances is fundamental to what we do. It comes naturally to us at sea. And this morning's seminar is a superb testament to our collegiate approach to how we see the world together. Today, I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about maritime security, and I intend to share some thinking as to why we think it's important, why it may be at risk, and what we should, and in many cases are, doing through our individual and collective capabilities to protect and preserve it. So, what is maritime security? Why does it really matter? Well, the definition of the term maritime security varies, as we all know. While no internationally agreed definition exists, the term has often been used to describe an umbrella term, both existing and new regional international challenges to the maritime domain. Evolving initially from a narrow perspective around national naval power projection, maritime security really is now somewhat of an umbrella term, one that allows us to group together and classify issues in the maritime domain that are related to national, regional, and global security. The maritime environment, economic trade and development, and of course, human security. And whilst we may have different perspectives, I think we all agree that it's important to us all and the ongoing success of our respective countries. In the main, maritime security is intrinsically linked to the security of trade and hence to our prosperity. In this respect, it means what happens at sea is really felt on the land. Taking the example of the global shipping industry alone, operating in the maritime domain presents a wide and complex range of security challenges to be aware of and to mitigate against. Piracy and armed robbery at sea, the trafficking of people and illicit goods, maritime pollution and illegal fishing, maritime terrorism and interstate rivalry or territorial disputes are just some examples which are familiar to us all. Now, as maritime nations, the threat to our security is very real. And the result of these threats, many of which are taking place beyond the horizon, and in many cases in international waters, comes back with a tide to directly impact our lives ashore. Piracy increases shipping costs and routing times, passing on price rises or shortages direct to our consumers, causes disruption or delay to production of flows of energy by sea, placing our access to secure, affordable energy at risk, just to name a couple of the most obvious effects. The real-world impact of a few oil or gas tankers not making it to their destination ranges from commercial and economic pressure at one end of the spectrum to environmental catastrophe to nothing happening when you flick the light switch on at home or try to turn on your cooker. Furthermore, in today's global system, we're all truly connected, for better or for worse, which makes that challenge much more difficult. Now, this very fact was summed up really eloquently by the Indian President Modi during his maritime security speech last year at the UN. Our prosperity depends on the active flow of maritime trade, and barriers in this path can pose a challenge to the entire global economy. Really powerful. The crux of his remarks can best be summed up as signposting that a comprehensive approach to maritime security is required in order to protect and support legitimate maritime activities whilst countering traditional and non-traditional threats in the maritime domain. So what? Maritime security is absolutely an international responsibility. Home to some of the economies and cultures that have driven global development so strongly over the past decades, regions such as the Indo-Pacific, and particularly where we stand today, the Indian Ocean region, have and continue to experience tremendous growth. Growth that is enabled and supported by a rules-based international system, leveraging maritime freedoms, access, and connectivity at its very core. All of us here are representing our nations, and I'm sure we'd agree, with such progress and power comes responsibility. There's an obligation on us all to work nationally in support of maritime security, and together internationally to safeguard and protect the system such that we preserve the gains we enjoy, while simultaneously bolstering the system to create opportunity for growth for others as it has for us. How we achieve this is what drives us and our relationships. And I'm going to offer a few thoughts now from the UK and specifically the Royal Navy's perspective on how we might meet this challenge together. When looking at how we can deploy or grow the capabilities to meet these challenges, I like to keep things simple. We're all sailors at the end of the day, and that's usually a good way to go. So I'll focus on 5 key themes. First of all, we need agreement. Now, whilst we are partners and allies, I recognize we don't always agree on everything. It's inevitable that across such a broad and diverse theme, such as maritime security, there may at times be points of disagreement. However, despite this, there's a rich seam of agreement amidst the key issues and challenges that permit a powerful consensus for action, whilst preserving room for constructive challenge along the way. To deliver success in the maritime domain, we also need partnerships. Partnerships that can offer us all a stage upon which to voice an opinion, raise issues, leverage a stake in creating the regional and local solutions that are required. The slide here highlights some great examples of where such partnerships have delivered really tangible success. The IMO, the Indian Ocean Naval Symposium, the Indian Ocean Rim Association, Combined Maritime Forces, the CTFs, RECAP, and of course the Indo-Pac Maritime Coordination Cell hosted by the US out of Hawaii. In considering that cooperation is a principle of war, we need to be prepared to share information in order to elicit success. Something that we are delighted we've achieved collectively with the various maritime domain awareness programs operating in the Indian Ocean region and recently established intelligence fusion centers, which are providing such valuable touch points for embedded liaison officers to improve our collective ability to share information with each other in the pursuit of effective maritime security. Finally, we need presence and commitment. The UK is committed to the Indo-Pacific region and being an active player in the mechanisms and frameworks that derive solutions to the challenges that are currently facing the region. Our commitment was amplified last year when the UK government published a comprehensive integrated defence review. This review clearly recognised the Indian Ocean and the Indo-Pacific regions as being central to how the global commons and its future develops. And it made clear our commitment to being with you in the region and deeply engaged in the mechanisms and frameworks that produce the solutions to its challenges. An easy thing to say, I know, but we're backing up our words with actions. As a follow-on to the deployments of Albion, Sutherland and Montrose to the region in 2018 and 19, the inaugural deployment of our Queen Elizabeth Carrier Strike Group last year, a multinational effort, achieved great things. Only 4 months ago, the CSG-21 task group carried out the most complex, large-scale and ambitious range of integrated exercises with the Indian Armed Forces. In doing so, making a clear statement of our intent to be more than just a voice at the other end of the phone. After CSG's 2021's auspicious engagement, we're keen now to maintain our momentum. The forward deployment of the Royal Navy's offshore patrol vessels, HMS Spey and HMS Tamar to the region, is part of our what comes next statement. These warships deployed to the Western Pacific late last year, and many of you may have worked with them already. Forward deployed to the Indo-Pacific indefinitely, these ships are superb platforms for a range of maritime security, capacity building, and wider defence and defence industry cooperation work. They are the immediate manifestation of the UK's commitment and presence, and have been busy already, not least in Tonga, delivering vital humanitarian aid and disaster relief following their tragic tsunami at the beginning of the year. Operating flexibly throughout the Indo-Pacific region, you'll be seeing a lot of them around the bazaars. And I can only apologise for the cruel mistress that is COVID that has prevented their late withdrawal from this superb exercise. Tamar and Spey are but one of a broader plan. Downstream, as that plan unfolds, expect to see the forward deployment of a UK littoral response group, comprising of our amphibious platforms and their escorts to operate in the Indian Ocean from late 2023, further contributing to the regional security and assurance alongside our key partners in the region. This slide gives a brief idea of the scale and scope of capability cooperation and partner activity that we hope to embark on with key partners and allies in the region, leveraging opportunities to conduct the full range of maritime security engagement, from maritime liaison assessment teams to work with key partners to better understand our future challenges, support augmentation, liaison and training teams to enhance the delivery of defence effect through partnered operations, engagement and training, building up through strike team deployment for partnered training. Where the requirement exists, a larger tailored strike group of up to 150 ranks may deploy. That will give us the full range of amphibious options for surface, air and ground manoeuvre capabilities to be rendered in support of a partnered operation. So to bring this to a close, I want to return full circle to what PM Modi's speech to the UNSC said last year. We recognise this in the UK. Our aspiration as a global Britain requires a truly global navy, protecting our interests worldwide, engaged with our key partners and allies in an increasingly grey, technologically advanced battle space. Our capital investment in new ships, submarines, aviation capabilities and commando forces has technology woven right through the very heart of it. We look forward to deploying these capabilities to work alongside you in the years to come as we maximise every drop of energy and resource toward achieving our shared aims and objectives in the region. Throughout this endeavour, one thing is for sure. Maritime security will continue to be an enduring constant and will only be guaranteed by working together in collaboration with you, our key partners and allies. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Our next speaker is Captain Harisundar Raju from the Royal Malaysian Navy. He's been the commanding officer of the fast attack craft KD Gunnars, as also KD POS. He's currently holding the appointment of commanding officer of Pustakmar, which is the Maritime Tactical Center in the Western Fleet Command Headquarters. Over to you.
Thank you, Admiral, sir. Admirals, senior officers, esteemed panelists, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Yeah, good afternoon, sir. First and foremost, sir, on behalf of the Royal Malaysian Navy, I would like to take this opportunity to express our sincere appreciation for the Chief of the Navy, sir, Admiral Hari, sir, for being able to inviting us to be able to take part in this prestige conference. It is indeed a great pleasure and honor for me to be here to share my thoughts and my aspiration, especially the topic given to us with regards to enhancing capabilities towards the shared maritime interests and security. I look forward for the opportunity to share and learn from everybody here the experiences and all their perspective, so we'll be able to have a shared interest. First and foremost, let me say that this conference is important because it gathers fellow maritime security practitioners and stakeholders from various regions, and that we cherish as partners towards enhancing maritime security. We are also be able to share thoughts and ideas in addressing the various maritime security issues and challenges which are common concern to all of us. I'm very sure that in many forums, we have discussed topics on cooperation and partnership with regards to shared maritime security interests. However, I strongly believe at some point of time, we need to continue, revisit, and remind ourselves that the threat and the challenges are evolving, in which we require to keep renegotiate the situation as to be always aware, relevant, ready, and responsive. Ladies and gentlemen, in today's speech, my presentation will be focusing on the following key concerns. First, what are the most common and evolving maritime security challenges that influence and impact the traditional role of the navies? Second, what innovative opportunities are there for greater cooperation between the navy's partners and other stakeholders? Maritime security, despite its common usage, is not an easy term to define because it involves a wide range of concerns and differs from nation to nation. The traditional reason for a country to develop its naval force to have control of the sea, especially bordering their own states, and ability to protect it. Naval power are positioned where and where is required for necessary to protect the states. In recent decades or recent time, however, the maritime security concerns have expanded greatly because of emergence of new non-traditional threats and a radical change of maritime security violence. We are now facing with multifaceted challenges from various aspects of maritime security, especially on maritime claims and dispute. In addition to this, which also includes emergence of modern piracy, terrorism, militancy, new criminal activities, environmental issues and disasters, and etc. More worrying is that the list is ever growing, and such threat will surely change the role of the navies in the world now and in the future. The effect is not just impacting the peace and security of the nation, but also the region and the world. It is important for us to comprehend and make sense of the factors and elements that evoke such changes before we seek to remedy or to minimize or mitigate and manage the implication. In today's globalized world, we can't afford to stand alone. We will be defeated by any opponent. And if you don't play the game as a team, protecting one's turf or one's power will not help us. These challenges strongly influence the traditional role of a navy in the world. We need to be more innovative in seeking creative ways and means to establish sustained cooperation, whether within states, between the nations, and agencies. Effectively, what we need to do is that we need to break down silos. All of us need to work together more effectively and efficiently. And I can see Milan has shown the proof and witness what we are doing now. Allow me to expand some points with regards to what I have mentioned just now. The impact of technology. The advancement of technology is the primary causal factor responsible to set the stages in the recent decades. this including communications and transportation. In the present borderless world, maritime transportation and communication are the key elements of this phenomenon and has left an aggregation from global supply chain to continually grow in size and importance. The importance of securing the global supply chain is obviously a matter of great international concern. The way we conduct our business and the way we communicate has been changed exponentially due to technology advancement. The threat of non-state actors, such as the terrorist group, maritime criminal, pirates, militants, and etc., in the dynamic international relations, has also shaped new challenges to the maritime security, which we are all aware of. The myriad of the threats have created uncertainties and fear of both government and the maritime community that the global supply chain will be disrupted. We have to be aware of that. Next is we are talking about interdependencies. We need to cast out the denial syndrome and the bad things that will not happen. Rest assured that mostly maritime problems are contagious and transboundary in nature. An issue that occurs in one country can just quickly become bilateral, regional, or in fact global concern. The only way to address such challenges would be enhancing cooperation and partnership. Finally, another final point is the effect of climate change. The region, of course, in fact the world, has in recent years badly affected by natural disasters, either from the sea or the unpredictable mode of the Mother Nature, both leaving a trail of devastation. Apart the risk, such disasters is likely to increase. Whether you believe it or not, it will increase due to global warming and disproportion of human activities and urbanization. Such disasters and calamities have increased, and in the need for the navies and the armed forces to be responsive and address the national and regional crises have changed. Despite of all these changes and issues, we shall not look at the sea as an obstacle, but rather an opportunity, particularly to further strengthen existing cooperation and fellowship among the countries as international partners. A region that is peaceful and prosperous is good for the global community and economy. On the same note, we as a maritime community need to further enhance our role in upholding the maritime security and at the same time intensively our working relationship. Finally, sir, despite the prevailing maritime security challenges, whether from traditional or non-traditional security threats, there are opportunities for us to explore seriously as to further enhance cooperating and partnership. In the sense, strategic engagement between nations are essential. This will accord all stakeholders the opportunities to share their thoughts to seek innovative, creative, and most importantly, effective collaboration. Once again, I would posit that we are in a temporary or transitional phase. The situation is evolving and we are still adapting and adjusting to the changes. There are many uncertainties as to what lies ahead. Therefore, we have to be persistent and continue to explore new ways, improve the way we do on maritime security business. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I end my speech. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain. Our next speaker is Captain Junji Tabuada, who is currently the Superintendent, Fleet Training and Doctrine Center. He's also been the skipper of numerous ships and crafts and a proud member of the Philippines Military Academy. Please go ahead.
Admiral R. Hari Kumar, Chief of the Naval Staff, esteemed representatives of the Government of India, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. A pleasant day to everyone. First of all, I would like to express the Philippine Navy's sincere appreciation to the Indian Navy in the 2022 for your kind invitation. It is an honor to be invited as one of the speakers of Milan's 2022 International Maritime Seminars, a significant platform that facilitates purposive discussions concerning maritime issues of contemporary relevance, which aids in fostering academic interactions between different maritime stakeholders in pursuit of peace and stability in our global maritime commons. This year, Milan 2022's theme, camaraderie, cohesion, collaboration, underpins the need to elaborate the significance of camaraderie at sea and cultivation of engagements between navies as we address several security challenges that we are facing in our maritime domain. Today, it is my privilege to present to you the Philippine Navy's perspective on its contribution in enhancing capabilities towards shared maritime security. We live in a blue planet with oceans figuring prominently in our lives. It covers more than 70% of the Earth's surface, and by volume, it is considered as the largest space that is inhabited by life. An overwhelming majority of countries around the world rely on oceans and seas due to its multiple facets of relevance to our daily living, where it is utilized both as a source and a medium of livelihood, transport, transit, and trade. This is affirmed in one of the Prime Minister's Narendra Modi's speeches, where he stated that oceans are considered as our shared global commons and the lifeline of international trade. After all, it constitutes resources that are significant for the survival and prosperity of all people, making it the foundation of the world's global economy and modern society. However, the reliance of nations upon our maritime global commons has constantly been affected by the existence of an array of maritime security challenges that puts at risk peace, freedom, and stability in our oceans and seas. Accordingly, these challenges include both traditional and non-traditional security threats, such as threats to freedom of navigation, unilateral attempts to change the status quo, and non-adherence to the international law, piracy and armed robbery, maritime terrorism, drug and firearms trafficking, illegal trafficking and the smuggling of migrants by sea, and intentional and unlawful damage to the marine environment. These challenges are further exacerbated by the threat of the COVID-19 pandemic, which continues to affect the world today. The transboundary nature of these challenges poses political, social, and environmental repercussions to nations across the world, as well as to maritime security. On the part of the Philippines, as a maritime nation, our country is also experiencing a rapid evolving strategic environment confronted by a broad spectrum of challenges on multiple fronts, internally and externally. The existence of these challenges warrant a robust Philippine maritime response, of which the Philippine Navy plays a role and through the enhancement of our capabilities. Despite the onslaught of the COVID-19 pandemic, the efforts of the Philippine Navy in fulfilling its vision to becoming modern, multi-capable, and responsive has not been thwarted. As a matter of fact, the Philippine Navy has come a long way in its achievement of the said vision, regardless of the pandemic. While 2020 is more commonly known as the year when COVID-19 broke out, the Philippine Navy has marked 2020 significant for a very different reasons. It was this year that we were able to receive the bulk of our vital defense acquisitions, such as the first anti-submarine warfare-capable helicopters, the two Leonardo AW159 Lynx Wildcats, including its munitions, the Spike and Loss missiles, and the Blue Shark anti-submarine torpedoes, as well as the Scan Eagle unmanned aerial systems that consist of 8 unmanned aircraft vehicles. Apart from these milestones, it was also this year when the Philippine Navy received its first ever guided missile frigate, the FF-150 BRPO Sirizal. The delivery of this frigate is considered as the highlight of the organization's 2020 capability enhancement programs. FF-150 sister ship, the FF-151 BRP Antonio Luna, arrived at the earlier part of 2021. With its anti-air capabilities, the Mistral 3 surface-to-air missiles following suit a few months later. More of these defense acquisitions will be expected in 2022. The Sea-Star missiles, which will be the main surface-to-surface weapon of the Jose Rizal class, will be arriving in the first quarter of this year, while 2 of the 8 units of Shaldag Mark V fast attack interdiction craft missile will be arriving at the last quarter of the year. In addition, a budget has also been allocated to procure 6 offshore patrol vessels and 2 missile-armed corvettes. Lastly, the Philippine Navy is also glad to announce that it has purchased the long-awaited BrahMos supersonic anti-ship cruise missile, making it a member of a small group of Southeast Asian countries who possess such capability. The BrahMos missile is the ideal weapon for the Philippine Navy's shore-based anti-ship missile project and will be utilized with the Philippine Marine Corps Coastal Defense Regiment. Along with the upgrade of its assets, the Philippine Navy has also continued conducting high-impact international defense and security engagements with its partner navies, such as participating in international maritime exercises, virtual symposiums, conferences, and personal exchanges with like-minded navies. This includes the 15th ASEAN Navy Chiefs Meeting, the 24th International Sea Power Symposium, the 4th Multilateral Maritime Virtual Key Leaders Engagement, and the 4th International Maritime Security Symposium, to name a few. Further, the Philippine Navy also regularly avails foreign educational courses and trainings with counterpart navies that aid in harnessing the skills of our personnel. Likewise, India sends international military students to the Philippines, an example which it is availing of the AFP Command and General Staff Course for one of India's military officers this year. The Philippine Navy also regularly partakes in an array of bilateral and multilateral exercises. It was during the pandemic that the Philippine Navy was able to participate in and conduct its most momentous activities. Last August 2020, the Philippine Navy successfully sent FF-150 to 2020 RIMPAC. During this time, the Philippine Navy was finally able to proactively participate due to the upgraded asset. We also regularly participate in the several exercises, namely Exercise Kamandag, Exercise Sama-Sama, Lumbas, Sikat, Kakadu, and Exercise Komodo, among others. Last October, the Philippine Navy was also able to successfully host the culmination of the 17th Western Pacific Naval Symposium, which is historic as it is the first time an event of such nature was hosted virtually. And this will be the first of many for the Philippine Navy as it continues to participate in significant engagement that ensures maritime security. Having said all of this, it is clear that the organization was not hindered by the COVID-19 pandemic. Notwithstanding the present issues and challenges COVID-19 entails, the Philippine Navy was able to adapt and respond without compromising its vision of modernizing its capabilities. Even more so, it is because of the pandemic that the importance and urgency of enhancing capacity and capabilities are stressed more than ever because of the exacerbated security challenges of the current maritime environment to which navies around the world are now operating in. The need to improve operational readiness and responsiveness is clearly highlighted. I also want to emphasize the complex nature of maritime security challenges compounded by the pandemic, which warrants increased engagement between navies despite fewer face-to-face interactions. The conduct of Milan 2022 is a great example of the Navy's capacity to adapt to the new normal and to continue naval cooperation. Further, through engagements such as the International Maritime Seminar, channels of communication can be opened and mutual understanding on the need to uphold the rules-based order. In closing, it is said that the 21st century will unequivocally be a maritime security pointing towards the growing dependence on resources from oceans and seas, as well as the significance of maritime trade and transport, which is the backbone of global economy. However, maritime security will also continue to be undermined by daunting threats that pose extensive negative consequences across the globe if remained unresolved. Through the continuous modernization of the Philippine Navy, we are able to contribute to the Philippines' robust maritime response in addressing challenges in our maritime domain. The enhancement of our capabilities also enables the Philippine Navy to engage and collaborate with counterpart navies through a aforesaid spectrum of activities and engagements that foster a safe and secure maritime environment, exemplified in our participation in different international defense and security engagements. Bounded by the belief that unilateral solutions are often inadequate in addressing today's maritime security challenges, the Philippine Navy will continue the enhancement of our capabilities as well as collaborate with counterpart navies in pursuit of addressing several maritime security challenges and contributing to maritime security. Accordingly, it is through camaraderie, cohesion, and collaboration where we show our firm resolve in contributing to international stability. Ultimately, it is our willingness to engage and cooperate with each other which creates enabling conditions that contribute to the protection of our global maritime commons and the assurance of a safe maritime space. Thank you and mabuhay.
Thank you, Captain. So we are about 9 minutes behind. Can we allow a few questions before I sum up? Thank you, sir. Does anybody have a question?
Good morning, sirs. I'm Captain Uday
Yes,
from the
sir.
Indian Navy. The question is to all the panelists. The Indo-Pacific is a home to economies of varied sizes. Enhancing capabilities comes at a price. With dwindling budgetary allocations for own requirements, how do navies balance requirements and assisting friends and allies? Particularly in the backdrop of some revisionist actors with very deep pockets. Also, how does ASEAN look at addressing this challenge? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the very good questions. Allow me to take the question first. You're talking about Asian countries, right? This is from Malaysian perspective. Asian countries, we always we have the Asian way, ASEAN way. So the way we do things is always been in a cooperative manner and consensus. So in order to enhance our relationship, we already the ASEAN Charter already mentioned talking about ASEAN centrality. So whatever it is, whatever actions we are moving on in the future, we always focus on this consensus, all right? And that's why since the ASEAN countries is not that rich countries, as you say, so that is one of the reasons why the cooperation is very, we need that cooperation very much, right? We have the major powers coming in the area. We are the center of the South China Sea, and mainly all the disputes are coming from there. So there's no other way, as I mentioned just now. The only way is we need to collaborate and cooperate with each other. And the vital part here is the information sharing, right? And of course, because of the budget, the only way is the cooperation is the most only way out in order to get everything compounded. Thank you.
Yeah, I would support that, that comment there. Collaboration is absolutely key to success here. You know, we all have limited coffers with which to finance our capability programs, and And the balance of investment choices are really key here and aligned to future threat developments, future force developments going forward. And so we need to inculcate, first of all, a really value-conscious culture so that we spend our defence budgets in specifically targeted areas. But the collaboration piece allows us to develop a culture amongst key partners and allies of technology sharing, de-risking developments downstream. You know, and the Integrated Future Electronic Propulsion Program is a classic example of where we're willing to collaborate going forward to help de-risk other navies in that program. But it happens in many other areas, and that ability to partner and share on a capability development level is fundamental going forward. And of course, the other great thing is that it allows us to fight in a much more coherent way, because the technologies are the same, the thinking is the same, the doctrine is the same, and so actually it brings us together as navies when we're required to do that right-hand edge of the spectrum operation.
Good afternoon. Thank you for that question. Before I will answer your question, sir, I will base it saying, unity is strength. Through teamwork, cooperation, and collaboration, we can achieve great things. So my answer will be around that saying, sir. Thank you.
Anybody else with a question? Yeah, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm Lieutenant Commander Avijit Mishra, sir. May I ask the esteemed panel of speakers, while maritime security impacts both regional and international interests, as brought out by Commodore Tim Neal, what is that which may or will act as a trigger point to initiate actions, both through dialogue and other measures, towards any actor violating UNCLOS, even when that particular act may not violate the interests of a particular nation or a group of nations that have ratified the convention?
Okay. You're talking about UNCLOS and how it unites the whole maritime domain. I think Admiral Paro or Admiral Noonan, I think, mentioned about it is the UNCLOS is still not law binding yet. You know, it's just a convention. It's just a convention. So it already started. So every countries are slowly moving in for getting incorporated, and I'm very sure in the future it will enhance further and be more more place important part in how to rearrange the whole maritime domain, right? For example, those days, the UNCLOS was here quite early, and nobody even goes to the court itself. But with the Philippines coming in for the first time, so we already have that concern. So perhaps maybe in the future, more countries will be coming in and put the case up front without fear or favor, and by that, then this UNCLOS will be strengthened by itself, and it'll be law binding, and hope that the whole maritime community will be able to follow the UNCLOS.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm Commodore Dadwal, Indian Navy. My question is to Admiral Fayad. You have said that the French forces are oriented towards West Asia or the Northwest Indian Ocean. How do you find the French forces in the Indian Ocean region now pivoting towards the Indo-Pacific, as other nations are doing so. The UK or the German Navy had recently sent a frigate all across the South China Sea. So how do you see the French forces pivoting that side?
I can say that my permanent deployments are made in the northwest Indian Ocean, but on a regular basis. My strategic level sent more strategic deployment towards the South China Sea or Pacific region. And for example, in the last 3 years, we sent one amphibious ready group to Japan and working with the Japanese defense forces. We sent a nuclear submarine patrolling for more than 4 months in the southwest of Pacific, and we sent also on a regular basis our nuclear carrier strike group in this region. The next deployment will be probably at the end of 2023 or in 2025. So I think we can consider that in complement with normal deployment and permanent deployment of naval and air assets in the region, we are able to send some political signal or some reassurance signal or some opportunities to work on interoperability with our allies in the Pacific region with what we view as strategic assets, that is to say nuclear submarine, carrier strike group or amphibious ready group. And we will continue to do so on a regular basis.
Thank you, sir.
One last question, if there's any. Okay. So I think what emerges loud and clear from the presentations that we heard this morning, as also what the 4 very well presented papers alluded to, is that there is no universal one-size-fits-all solution to maritime security. And that's simply because maritime security encompasses not just traditional themes like naval competition, geopolitical jostling, but also non-traditional themes like piracy, smuggling, gun running, etc., that were brought up. So, and I see that this is particularly the case in the Indo-Pacific region. And the Indo-Pacific region comprises 2 very different and disparate geographies: the Asia-Pacific sub-region and the Western Indian Ocean sub-region. And when you look at it deeply, and from what you hear this morning, I get the sense that the waters of the Asia-Pacific region are beset by a set of challenges and trend lines that are altogether different from what bedevils the Western Indian Ocean region. And the Western Indian Ocean region is, of course, bedeviled by a set of non-traditional challenges, all of these made worse by the acute lack of capacity and capability amongst most of the 25 nations that make up the region. So regional governments are in some way or the other handicapped because they cannot bring to bear the appropriate responses in order to cope with the diverse complexities of this domain. In the context of the Asia-Pacific sub-region, I think what emerges is that possibly managing the naval competition there will be quintessential to actually achieving maritime security in that region. And so we might say the navies were built and they were equipped in order to win wars, but I think the navies have an equally onerous responsibility in preventing them. So particularly ships of rival countries, when they're operating close together, responsible and non-escalatory behavior is going to be very important. Now, there was a lot of talk about the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. For whatever it's worth and whatever the perceptions are, I think the UNCLOS remains the last bulwark against lawlessness at sea. And we do appreciate that any legal framework has to evolve with contemporary trends, otherwise it's going to lose its meaning. And when I say evolve, it doesn't mean that it prejudices the original intent, but it just has to evolve and adapt to technological advancements, adapt to what was brought out in the morning, the malign capabilities of state and non-state actors, and possibly the expanding uses of the ocean over time. So it's very important also that the interplay between domestic laws and international laws is addressed. Because if domestic legislations and rules do not or are not harmonized with international legal principles, we're going to continue to see aggressive operations at sea. And that said, I think it's also important for any legal framework to be all-inclusive, not give the opportunity for countries to opt in or opt out, because that weakens an international legal regime and builds contradictions into a state's behavior. So there's a clear case in the Asia-Pacific region for strengthening the law, possibly collaboratively identifying weaknesses in that law and trying to fix it. The Western Indian Ocean region, the way I see it, it's going to continue to have a myriad of challenges festering that will be beyond the capacity of any single nation to address. And so, like it's been said many a time during the seminar, the first 2 sessions at least, that collaborative approaches are extremely essential. And so the bigger of the navies, the more resource-rich navies will have to possibly redouble their efforts and direct a significant portion of their resources towards capacity building and capability enhancement of some of these other countries that do not have the wherewithal to protect their sovereign territory and their sovereign interests. So everything that most navies are doing in the form of coordinated patrols and ship and helicopter doleouts, training, hydrography, all of these will have to continue apace with the initiatives that we just saw, IONS and RECAP and many of these other things. So I think it's been a productive session, and pretty much there is a lot of congruence between what was said in the morning and what is being said now. So I'd once again like to thank the 4 speakers for the great presentations, and thank you, sir, for giving us the opportunity.
Thank you, sirs, once again for providing insights for enhancing capabilities towards shared maritime security. May I once again request the Chief of Naval Staff, Admiral R. Hari Kumar, to please come on the stage and felicitate the panelists. Thank you, sirs. That, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the conclusion of the first day's proceeding of the International Maritime Seminar. We look forward to hosting you for sessions 3 and 4 tomorrow. Have a good day. Thank you.